Is there a way to turn on the sensitivity of a tablet?
Yes. So I don't think it's going to show up on mine, but I'll show it on your, we'll see. Yeah, the drivers on my computer don't work with this tablet. So go to, system preferences, and the question in here. So the sensitivity, so this is your tip feel. So you want to be able to press softer or harder?
It's too sensitive.
It's too sensitive.
Yeah.
So then you want to take this tip feel and crank it up to firmer, and then try that. You can actually take and when you press down, you'll actually press down your tablet. You'll see what your current pressure is.
Okay.
So is that still too soft?
No, that's better actually.
Okay, if you want to crank it up, pop it up another, and you'll get a feel for it. But yeah, a lot of people will change that. Okay, so I just want to look at a couple of the retouching, skin eyes retouching stuff that was turned in. Just to go over that part really quickly. Okay. We're going to look at Taylor's to begin with. All in all, I thought this stuff was, you guys, again, you're excelling relative to other classes. So this was Taylor's, and I thought this part was done exceptionally well. The only thing that, comment that I had about it is there's still these little baby white dots in here that you really cannot get out tonally, retouchingly speaking. Again, there's absolutely no tone in these two in order to burn them down. So you've got to go after those little white dots using pixel retouching. But again, in the pixel retouching that we talk about doing, you would be working on this pixel layer right here, probably with a healing brush tool, and make sure when you're doing that, because you are working on a pixel layer. Again, this is not a blank layer. This does not work with blank empty layers, but it does work with another pixel layer, is that you can actually take healing brush tool and you can change its blending mode down to darken only. So it'll only change just these little white dots. And again, the place where you would sample from to actually do that, well, you can see, for instance, this is a pretty good illustration right here. There's an area of skin right in here that's relatively dark. And when I say relatively dark, it's dark relative to, say, like this area of light skin right here. Again, what you try to do when you're doing your pixel work is you try to make the least amount of change possible. You need to make enough change to make it effective, but you want to do the least amount possible. So this is even a better situation right down here. If you look at this area right here, you could sample this dark area of skin and hit this pixel or hit this white spot with it. However, that would be more of an extreme change than if you were to, say, sample this area of skin right here, which is considerably lighter than this area is right here. So again, if you sample this area and fix that white dot, it's less of a shift, it's less of a change than doing this darker area right here. So it's just something to keep in mind, the areas that you actually do use as far as that part, where you sample from, and how you would go about fixing that. So I want to take a look at Elizabeth's next. This had one of the best hair fixes that I've seen. What I loved about this is what she did in this. If you take a look at the original, hang on one second, let me get down so I can see the original. If you take it, this is what the original one actually looked like. She's done two things here, and I'm going to turn this off to show you the two things that she did. Number one, she actually carries her hair fix all the way through to the edge of the image. One of the problems that a lot of people had was a lot of people did stuff like this. I'm going to screw hers up just to show you what it is I'm talking about. A lot of people ended up doing stuff like this. They would do the hair fix part for areas where there was a blank in their hair, but then all of a sudden, because they didn't carry the whole thing through, you could see the line where the new hair was and the old hair wasn't. So the fact that she carried her whole thing through, I'll show you again what it looks like. The fact that she carried her hair fix all the way through to the edge of the image, she ended up covering up hair that didn't need to be fixed. But in doing so, she kept her hair patch continuous. The whole thing was completely continuous. And so it ended up working out really well. But the part that I loved about it is she gets this little hair flippy thing going on down here, which just starts changing direction altogether. And it made it so believable to me, right? It wasn't just like fixing that little patch part. I've never seen anybody quite do that, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I would say yes, it was intentional, and I would take full credit for it and say, yes, it took me an hour to do that, son of a bitch, and I'm charging you for it. Anyway, so anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I thought that was actually a really, really well done hair fix. Take a look at Alicia's next. And in this one, I just thought it was extremely well done. I really feel like there's still skin texture here. This then becomes a question of ultimately the end game that you're going for here. Do I feel like she could have pushed this further? Yes, I do in some cases, but not all cases are going to call for that really super flawless skin. And when you look at the difference of where she was, where she started, and where we ended up, I just thought that this part was actually really well done. Her large tonal retouching, I thought, was also well done. I'll show you what those two look like, or the difference in those two. So this is what her tonal retouch smaller scale look like. Maybe not as complex as some cases, but again, if she was doing this for really high-end beauty, I would say she didn't go far enough with it. But if she was doing this for like a portrait of Hillary Clinton, I would say that this was like perfectly done. So again, it's the intent has a huge amount to say about it. This is actually what her then her larger tonal retouch, the bigger, broader area actually looked like. So again, if we go back and do the whole show right here, you can see this is what it's actually doing. And again, this was done really well. She's evening out skin tones, but she's still keeping highlights and shadows. The idea of this layer is to smooth out skin tone, but it is not to remove the natural highlight and shadow area that you would have in skin that gives skin dimension. So you want to keep the highlights and shadows. So for instance, this highlight that's on her cheek, you want to keep this part. You want to keep the shadows that are actually happening to give her, a roundness to her cheekbone, that kind of stuff. You need to keep those things as a part of this. But what this larger retouch, tonal retouching thing is about smoothing out those skin tones. And you can see specifically the area under the eyes, the stuff right above her on her upper lip, all of that kind of stuff actually really was well done. So Joe's really quick. So in Joe's case, that's his small retouching. Yeah, this was actually his large retouching right here. In Joe's retouching, and it's something that you guys need to get in the habit of doing, is just turning your stuff on and off really quickly to see what's really going on in here. And in my case, I felt like, and you can sort of, yeah, you can see it up here on the big screen as well on my computer. It looked to me like Joe went a little bit too far around the edges, around this part. I sort of see this sort of like donutty halo that's going around this, still a little bit dark in the center and a little bit too light around the exterior, around the outsides right there. And if you turn this on and off really quickly, it helps, it just makes it easier to spot that. That doesn't mean that Joe has to go back in and completely redo this or take this out. Just remember that this is like any other layer, and he could actually put a layer mask on this guy, take a brush, make it a really low opacity brush. So I'm going to drop my opacity down to like around a 15% with a little bit of, with black as my foreground color, and then just simply go over this area a little bit. And so now this would be the difference in what I just did as far as that goes. To actually blend that part in just a little bit more. So if you feel like you overshoot the mark, don't worry about it. Put a mask on it and pull just those smaller parts back. If you ended up overshooting the entire thing, I'm just going to get rid of the mask. You can also remember that this is just a regular layer, and it's got opacity to it. And you could certainly come in and drop the opacity down to see what that part actually looked like. couple more to go, and then we'll start working on today. In Marina's here, this is, I'll show you, it's just another issue of what we were really talking about. And you can spot it right here in her hair fix. Overall, it was pretty well done, but you spot the hair patch right here. You can see where, and if we take a look at the, we're not going to see the hair patch because it's not on an isolated layer, but you can spot where the fix is right here because it doesn't continue on through. So again, if she had simply taken this guy, and even though all of this hair right here is good, if she had simply run the entire hair, the additional hair that she's adding completely up through to the very edge of her frame, whatever, then you would never have known that this was out of place, that it was a start and a stop. Which apparently I think is what Sydney has done. So let me take a look at hers really quick. No, in that case, it would be the very same thing here. So again, this is in Sydney's case right here. And again, you can sort of spot it. It begins to kind of blend in this area right in here. You can sort of see it. But again, if she had carried that completely through, and it may be on this guy, I'm going to go ahead and try to fix this. So again, this is what the hair patch looks like. And so you can see it doesn't carry all the way through. So again, I'm going to select the mask, hit the B key to get a brush. Hide others. I'm going to go ahead and crank my opacity all the way up. Make this a relatively soft brush. Normal, working in this. White is my foreground color. What? Oh. And then continue this on through. Now you can see that I run out of hair right here. If we take again a look at this, I went ahead and continued my mask, but I ran out of hair. You can fix that as well by simply transforming the hair. So I'm going to select the hair layer right here to make it, the pixel layer to make it active. I've gone ahead and continued most of the mask through. I may have to do a little more finessing once I do this, but I'm going to transform again with the link broken between the mask and the pixel layer. Make sure that the pixel layer is selected. Command T to bring up a transform dialog box, and then go ahead and just stretch that out. And I've just pulled that hair extension out. And so I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. I'm going to do a snapshot of this just so that we can do a quick before and after. So this is where Sydney's was, and you can, again, you can spot the hair. It kind of blends pretty well, but again, depending on how things go, I can see it. So anyway, that's where it started from, and that's where it goes now. And so it's just a thing to sort of keep in mind. And then finally, I want to show you guys one last one. Every year, I feel like I'm going to, I pick a new one that I'm going to show to the class for next semester. And in this case, it is going to be Samantha's. So I just want everybody to take a look at this. It's just proof that this can really be done. So look at the skin. It looks like that's real skin. That's not this plastic skin. That's real skin. But she has done this entire thing tonally. I mean, it's just insane. This is what her mask, this is what her tonal retouching layer looks like. And right now, everybody should applaud because it's just brilliantly done. And I know she worked her ass off on doing it. So it's just to go to show that this does really work. You know, when you guys got into this class, I think that this was a, you know, this was an ambition of yours. And it's just done, it's done well, it's done right. This is, again, this is what you get to charge big money for. Okay, so that gets us through that. Can you start me a sign in, please? Thanks. Okay, let me get back to where, how many people in this room, I think, Okay, I just want to go over this really quickly. For the most part, you guys have been actually really good in this class, and there haven't been too many late assignments or that kind of stuff. If you are doing, just again, you can check your grade in Moodle at any time. You can see what it is you're missing. Please get those assignments in. It just has such a huge impact on your grade. So at any rate, just to sort of throw that part out here. How many people in this room still shoot film? Anybody? And no, try not to do that anymore. Well, how many people in here have film or ever shot film that they scan? Okay, so a few of you guys. What's your biggest problem when you scan film? Dust, right? It's always the biggest problem. So I'm going to show you how to fix dust in a way that is going to make you both really happy that you learned it and really angry that somebody didn't show you this before. So at any rate, here we go. If you go to the folder for this week, this is the 9th week, right? Yep, it is the 9th week. In the 9th week one, there is a file called dustremoval.psd. If you can open that guy up. And I'm going to zoom in just to the top left-hand corner, and I'm zoomed in. You can actually come into 100%. That'll be a good place to actually be here. So I'm in the very top left-hand corner. This actually is a piece of film that was scanned, and this is typical of what you see in a lot of film scanning situations. And so you could go in with the healing brush tool, and you could spot all of these guys out and try and get. You can do all of that. However, I think that there's a better way to do this, or a faster way to do this, and maybe there's a better way of actually putting it. And so that's what I'm going to actually show you guys how to do. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this layer. So again, come over to the background, to the layers palette, grab your background copy and drag it down to make a copy of it. Because again, we would always have a virgin copy of this. We would never work on a layer that we couldn't recover from. So this is going to be my retouching. I'm going to double click on the name, and I'm actually going to call it pixel retouching, because that's what it is. Then with that layer active, I'm going to come up to the filter menu, and I'm going to come down to noise, and I'm going to come down to dust and scratches. So take a look up at my screen just if you don't know where I'm at. So up to the filter menu, down to noise, which is about just slightly more than halfway down, and over to dust and scratches. And when you let go, a dialog box will actually come up. It's the dust and scratch dialog box. There's two things that you actually use to impact, to control this filter. And in my suggestion, the first thing to do is to zero both of them out. So if you grab the little slider for radius, drag it all the way to the left, it never zeroes out. It'll go to a pixel of 1. And then threshold, if you click on it and drag it all the way over, it will go to 0. So to explain what these two things are, the two things that actually control this, if you take your, if you click on the radius, this radius is the first thing that you set. You can actually use the arrow keys to go up in numbers. So if you use the up key, you can actually go to a 2, and then to a 3, and then to a 4. And what you're looking to try to do is, what you can see is these little spots of dust. These little spots of dust actually have a pixel dimension to them. They're like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pixels wide. And so what you're saying to this filter is, I want you to run this filter on something that's at least, well, in our case right here, 1 pixel. Well, that's not enough for us to get rid of the dust. So I'm going to go to a 2. That starts to get rid of the smaller little bits of dust, but it doesn't get rid of this big old hunk of dust right here. Now, sometimes you'll have a really big old hunk of dust on here that's really an exception. It's an anomaly. There's nothing that is, thanks. I'm not trying to say that if you've got one gigantic piece that you use this filter or this technique to go after that. What you use this filter to do is you want it to go after the largest where you've got a whole lot of them that are that size. If you've got one just gigantic piece of dust, then you use the clone stamp tool or the healing brush tool just to get rid of that guy. But in our case right here, I can see it's this guy right here. I don't know that I'm going to go after this big one right here, but I am going after all these other little guys, and I'm going to go after the scratch as well. So I am not there yet. I'm going to continue to hit my up arrow. So I've gotten to 3 pixels. I've got the dirtiest computer screen in the world, so I don't know what's dust on my computer screen and what's dirt. So at 4 pixels, and you can use, again, your preview checkbox to turn this guy on and off to see what it is you're actually getting and what you're actually able to get rid of. So at 4 pixels, I'm actually able to get rid of the scratch and most of the dust guys. So I feel pretty good about that. Yes. Say what? It's still there at 4 pixels. Is your threshold down at 0? Okay, well then go to 5 pixels. Go to 6. Do you have your preview button unchecked? Number 1, you haven't made a copy of this guy yet, so hit cancel out of here. Make a copy of that guy first. Great, and then go up to filter, dust and scratch, and zero that out. Whoa, slow down. Where's the scratch?
Right there.
Okay, I don't see it, but go ahead. Try a 7 then.
I still see it.
Yeah, I don't really see the scratch. What I see is possibly a
Right there.
tonal thing.
It's still there.
Move your image, grab your image and move it down. The entire image, the entire Photoshop thing.
Oh,
Hit cancel.
Oh,
Yeah. Did it go with?
no.
No, it's a scratch on your screen. That's what I was just saying. My screen is so filthy, I can't really tell what's what. So I'm going to say probably around a 5 or a 6 should have gotten it out. Did that work for you guys? Okay, so that's the first thing. However, the other thing we need to do is we need to set threshold. And what threshold does is this. What threshold does is that it looks at the difference in tonal values between the particle of dust and the area that's surrounding it. And in our case, so what you want to do with this, especially if you've got film that has grain in it, what threshold does is it will start to restore your film grain. Because right now we've blown it all out. We've just softened the hell out of this image. So what you want to do with threshold, again, is you want to start grabbing threshold and you want to start dragging it up. It also will work with the arrow keys to the point that you start to see the dust and the scratch return. Now, in this particular case, in this image, you can't go much above like a 4 or a 5 before you start seeing the scratch returning again. So, but in the other images, you will actually be able to get this way up high. You'll get up into the 20s and the 30s, and you'll end up bringing the film grain back into your image, but you won't bring the dust back in your image right now. However, this is still doing a lot of significant damage to my image, but don't worry, we're not finished with this whole thing yet. So I ended up with a 5 and a 5. If you want to do the very same thing that I'm doing, then that's where I'm at. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. Okay, and I've just destroyed my image, but basically that's okay. So at this stage of the game, you want to make a history snapshot of what your image looks like right now. To do that, you come over to the history palette, you click on the little camera at the bottom of the history palette. Hopefully these computers are still set up that you get a dialog box that opens up. You did. And you want to name your snapshot Dust and Scratch. And say okay. Now this gets to be the tricky part. We've actually created a state, a history state of what this image looks like with that filter run on it. However, I don't want the filter run on the entire image. So in the history palette below that history state, you click back 1 level. So you come back to the name change. So I've just gone back, look up at my screen right here. I've got a history state that I've made called Dust and Scratch, but I go back 1 step in history right here because I don't want that whole Dust and Scratch filter applied to this entire image. Lindsay. It doesn't have what? And then you didn't change the name. It doesn't matter. Just go back 1 step. So you ran dust and scratch. That's fine. You've got that. So simply go back to duplicate layer, and it brings back all your scratches and all the dust. So you now see all the dust, you see all the scratches, the whole 9 yards, right? Okay, we're almost there. The next thing you want to do is click. Again, you do not want to look up at my screen really quick. You do not want to select this history state. If you pick it, you lose all of your history right here. The very next move I make, I'm going to lose all of this history. That's not what you want to do. Instead, what you want to do is simply click on the little square to the left of it. And that does not select the history state, but what it does say is that when you use the history brush, this is the state that you want to use. Does that make sense, where we're going with here? Okay, so what the history brush is going to do is the history brush is going to paint, wherever I use the history brush to paint, it's going to make it look like this state right here. Make sense? Oh, but wait, it gets better. We're not there yet. It gets better. So with the history brush selected, and the history brush is right under the clone stamp tool, if you click on the flyout menu, there's 2 of them in there. You want to make sure that you have the history brush, not the art history brush, but the history brush is the one that is selected. Then again, your brush strokes are exactly the same. So I'm going to click up here at the top. I'm going to do a completely soft brush. However, I have blending modes, and in the blending modes, you can change the blending mode of your history brush from normal to lighten. And when you do that and you start to work on these areas of dark dust, it will not change any of the lighter tones here. It will only make tones that are darker actually lighter. So with this setup like this, again, with not the state, but the little square to the left of it selected, you can come over here and you can simply paint out the dust. Yeah, that'll piss you off, won't it? That you've been doing all of that stuff all along, right? And it works really well. So if you've done all that, I want you to go back in history so that you undo all of your history brush work. So it brings back all the dust. That's not the only way that you can do this. I'm going to zoom back out a little bit so I can see a little bit larger area. I'm going to grab the lasso key, the lasso tool, which is the L key, and then I'm going to select just this entire top quadrant of this guy right here. So can everybody see the selection that I've made? I've just selected this entire guy right here. Then I can come up to the edit menu, down to fill. You can fill with history states. So for content, you want to come up to history, but again, you want to use a blending mode of lighten only. You do not want to change everything, because if you use just a normal blending mode, it will blur everything in here. That's not what you want it to do. You simply want it to take those little dark dots and make them lighter, and go ahead and say okay. Now you're really pissed that somebody didn't show you that, aren't you? We're heading for white dust right now. Okay, so before I get there, I want to zoom into the scratch that's on this guy's chest right here. So on the scratch on this guy's chest, and again, you'll see how much I think better this works than using a clone stamp tool. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect so I don't have an active selection going. Then I'm going to go back to my history brush. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. There's no reason for it to be and to do any more damage than you're going to do. Again, it is set to lighten. And then I'm going to click on this guy and simply drag it down and remove the scratch that's going right down through his chest. Can also remove the one that's on the surfboard, the one that's actually coming down there as well. There's another one coming up right on the edge of his jacket right there. There's 2 more dots over here. But you can see that in this case, we're actually exercising really good control on this. If you come over to the girl and you go all the way over to her right shoulder, you will see that there is a little white speck of dust right over here. So this is the way dust works. If you've got dust on a light background, it appears dark. If you have dust on a dark background, it appears light. And that's what's going on right here. So you can see sort of right where that shoulder seam is on the far right side of the image, there's a little white dot right there. If you do not change the blending mode of your history brush and you go to paint on this guy, you will notice that nothing happens. The reason nothing happens is because your blending mode is set to lighten. You simply change your blending mode from lighten to darken and take the dust out. And believe me, guys, you can bang through your dusty images like crazy. So again, I'm going to go back to lighten to take care of the line that's on her suit and the line that's on her stomach and on her thigh and down here below. And again, you might get to something that has got, again, a piece of dust that's actually too large that you cannot completely get it out, in which case you would simply go to a clone stamp tool. But this will get you through an image much, 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 much faster than normal. So again, I've got a couple of those things that are actually done right now. I'm going to go ahead and do another snapshot, and I'm just going to call it retouched, just to show you the difference of what this image would look like. So zooming in on this, up here in my history states, if I click on the dust and scratch state, you can see that it actually just turns the guy, both of them, it just mushes them completely. But if I go back to the retouched version, the dust is gone, but they're actually as sharp as they were to begin with. Are there questions about this guy? That worked out pretty nicely, didn't it? Okay, how many people watched the movies and read the assignments that I asked you to read about? Did you guys have a good spring break? No? Yes? No? Horrible? What? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry, what? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, then I'm actually going to stop our recording right now because I'm going to show. So wait, how many people did not watch the movies? This is going to be the easiest thing to say. Okay, most of you guys. That's fine. So we're going to watch them right now. However, they're copyrighted. So whenever I play these movies in the recordings, YouTube flags the recordings for possible copyright violation, and then you can't watch the movie. So I'm going to the video. So I'm going to stop the video right now. We're going to watch the movies, and then we will actually start back up after the break. So, and with any luck. So, of course, I finally get the video part to work. And the trick to making it work is using Firefox. And Firefox's latest update makes the plugins no longer work for Hangouts. So it's like I cannot win for losing. But so far, at least for the 10 minutes of that,